So, welcome, Mark. I'd like to introduce Marc Burman. Mark is a certified financial planner. And hello, Mark, but I'm actually going to just hand straight over to you if that's okay. Just let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about what we're talking about today.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Alka, for inviting me along today. So, just a little bit of information about me. So, my name is Marc Burman. I'm a certified financial planner. I'm also a level 6 advisor, which is the highest level of qualification you can achieve, and a member of the Society of Trust and Estate Planning, which means I can advise on inheritance tax and estate planning. And finally, just to top that off, I'm also a non-practicing solicitor. So that's a little bit of information about me. So what we are going to talk about today is a couple of tips to help save for the future. So a couple of practical, painless tips, as I call them, to help you save up for the future. So a couple of things we're going to just touch upon so you can see from the screen here. Number one is pay yourself first. Number two, don't wait for the right time to invest. Number three, how to use the power of compounding to your advantage. Four is taking professional advice. And finally, how to increase your financial knowledge. So what I'm going to start off with is paying yourself first.
You're making me smile, Mark. That sounds really interesting. I do like the sound of that. So, yeah, tell us a bit more.
Well, I mean, the thing is, with all the bills and everything going out of your account each month, it's really easy to lose track. And with all the best intentions in the world, particularly if you're starting out on your journey, on your career, I would say pay yourself first and set aside your savings and investments up before you pay for those other things. I would recommend automating the process. So each month, X amount comes out of your account and it goes into your savings, your investments. So that's set aside. One thing I noticed when I first came to London 25 years ago, the time goes very, very quickly. You're here a year, 5 years, 10 years, and before you know it, time's flown by so quickly. So I think it's really important. Just take stock, set this up automatically and let it do what it's supposed to be doing. So is what I would say is step number one. Very simple, but really quite effective. The second point is not waiting for the right time to invest. So it's very easy to put off the decision to invest, saying, look, I'm waiting for the right time, I'm waiting for the right market conditions, etc. The reality is there's never a right time to invest. It's more about actually getting started and just actually being in the market as soon as possible. So what I wanted to point out was a chart just to show what can happen to different types of investments. So quite simply, three choices here. You can hold your savings in cash. Alternatively, you can invest in bonds, or alternatively, equities would be investing in stocks and shares, etc. And this graph shows us that if you invested £1 in real terms, from 1899 to 1999, the difference in value. Okay, so what this is telling us is really, if you are going to plan for something, get on and do it, and just get started. And really, you can start to see the gains over time from this chart that we have here.
So it looks from your chart, Mark, as though the returns you get if you're just saving in cash is quite low compared to equities, and it's pretty stark difference, isn't there? So what do you do if you have just been saving in cash? What do you do next then?
Well, I mean, the challenge is if you're staying in cash, that your money's being eroded by inflation. So depending on which rate you look at, say inflation is a rate of 2%. If you're not earning 2% in your current account, in your savings account, then the value of your money, the true value of your money is actually losing value. So that means you can actually only buy a lot less with that money over time. So it's important, if you do have some objectives, that some form of action should be taken, and investing should be started. Another point to make is once you are invested and once you do start investing, whatever it might be, various different vehicles that are out there, once you're in the market, you should stay in the market for the long term. So you hear lots of talk about people trying to time the market. Oh, the markets are going down. I'm going to pull my money out. I'm going to go into cash. And this chart here really clearly shows you the effect of missing the best few days of the market. So this is within quite a long time period between 1997 and 2017. If you were to stay invested, so stay in the markets, not try and time the market, throughout that period, your annualized return, so your average return in each particular year in average will be 6.26%. Whereas if you miss 30 of the best days, if you come out of the market and try and get back in, but you've missed the best days, 30 of the best days, you'll go down to minus 1.05%. But here's the thing, missing 50 of the best days, so coming out of the market for that period, your return will go down to minus 4.06. So that the lesson from this chart is you must stay invested if you have these longer term objectives.
Right, grit your teeth and stay invested. That's the message.
Indeed. I mean, you may ask the question, well, when should I start coming out of the market? And the thing is, when you're being advised by a financial advisor, we operate something called lifestyling. So if you're due to retire in 5 years' time, as you get closer to retirement, we'll start coming out of the market for you. So what we don't want to be doing is you're approaching retirement, all of a sudden there's a market crash and you lose 40% of your investment. So the closer you get to that event, let's call it retirement, that the higher proportions of cash you would want to have in your investment, because that means it will be ring fenced, it'd be safer, and it will be, obviously you'd have more available for when you actually need it. So that's a really important point to make. So the next point is let compounding work its magic. So compounding, as we can see here, is the growth on the growth of an investment. So the longer you leave your investment untouched, the more time compounding has to work its magic, and in turn increase the sum of your investments. Now, it's funny because Albert Einstein actually described compounding as the eighth wonder of the world. And, if put simply, as I say, it's the growth on the growth. It's important to let compounding do what it's supposed to be doing. And here's another quick chart just to show you the difference between just starting investing early. So within a 10-year period, so if you can start investing at age 25 rather than 35, and here we're investing £5,000 every year with a 5% growth, we can see the vast difference here in what's available at a retirement age. So it could be the difference between these two figures here. Just by starting to invest early, we can see how the compounding has taken effect here. So that's the lesson that I'd like to put across at this point.
So I think, again, from that graph, that in terms of the differential, it looks as though now is the time to start investing wherever you are on that sort of age line. It's now?
Well, that's perhaps for another discussion, bearing in mind what's happening in the markets. It could be argued that at the moment the markets, we're in a sale in the markets. But that's perhaps more detail than we really need to go into at this point. But yeah, there is a strong argument to say now would be the time to certainly take action with a view to timing, but also what's going on in the market at the moment. Next point is taking professional advice. And, if you've seen my previous episodes, I talk about how it's important to take advice that's fully regulated and also to give you those protections. So if you are given advice that's incorrect, you will have recourse to the Financial Services Compensation Scheme and also recourse to the FCA itself. And the final point that I'd like to mention is increasing your financial knowledge. It's always good to actually have a great understanding of what's going on out there. And it's fair to say there's an awful lot of information out there that you could approach. It's very easy to get bogged down by it all. also, there's so many headlines and press releases about the market, and you may say, well, where shouldn't I go? Well, look, I wouldn't be distracted by what's out there at the moment. I wouldn't be looking at the hot share tips. I'd be looking at tried and tested approaches when it comes to investing your money. Couple of books that I found quite useful over the years. So there's a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, this is a book that it's phrased what the rich teach their children that the middle class and poor don't. So there's some really interesting angles in that book. I don't know if you've come across this one before, Alka.
Again, the reason I was smiling is my son just ordered this book. He's going to be 18 next month and wants to be an economist. So he just ordered this book, which arrived and landed on our doorstep. And unfortunately, the dogs went for it and they've eaten the back page of it. So it's just making me smile to see this book come up, which literally just was on our doorstep 2 days ago. But the rest of the book is intact, so he will be reading it. Thank you. That's a really good tip.
Useful to know. Good to know. And the other book is The One Page Financial Plan by Carl Richards. Now, he's a financial planner out in the US, but he's got some really interesting concepts of how you should consider your financial planning moving forward. And I highly recommend both of these books to give you a good insight into personal finance. So that's very much it for me on this episode.
Thank you again, Mark. I think that has been really useful. You've definitely given us some really useful sort of top headliners, and appreciably, as you sort of said, advice does need to be personalised. We've all got sort of different circumstances. But if we did have a few extra questions, or somebody wanted to sort of ask you a little bit more, what's the best place to get hold of you?
Yep, so you can email me. I would recommend you have a look at my website, which is marcburman.com. Some useful resources on there. And just wanted to wrap up with the FCA requirement that this, as you say, isn't personalised advice. If you want personalised advice, it's important that you have tailored advice from a financial, somebody who is fully authorised to give that advice. And because we've talked about investments, it's important to be aware that they can go up and they can go down, and past performance isn't a guide to future performance. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere before, but I need to point that out to you. So that's it from me, and thank you very much for inviting me along.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. That's all been really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.